Hello. Thank you all for coming this evening. My name is Tom Hall. I am the artistic director and co-head here at Montclair Film. I want to welcome you all to the 11th annual, thank you, my mom's here. The 11th annual Montclair Film Festival. We're so grateful to have you for tonight's conversation with Don Katz and Marcus Samuelsson, sponsored by our friends at Audible. We want to thank them so much for their support. So I want to express our admiration as well for all the groundbreaking work that Don and Leslie and the company have done in Newark and globally, actually. So we want to thank them for that. We also want to thank Chef Marcus Samuelsson for joining us. And yes. And for all that he's done to elevate the art of cooking in this country and for his incredible effort to make his work accessible to a wide range of patrons. I think that's a very important point, and I hope they go in depth on that tonight. We're honored to host this evening of conversation at the festival, and we're excited to learn more about Marcus's new Audible original documentary, A Seat at the Table, as well. We really want to, as soon as Sandman's over, I'll dive into that one. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our special guests, longtime Montclair resident, author, and Audible's founder, Don Katz, and chef, Marcus Samuelsson. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Your name?
So please enjoy the show. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. And welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here. It's been amazing to watch Tom and Evie and, of course, Stephen and Bob Feinberg and others build this MFF from an idea over just 11 years ago. It's been great to be here. You know, it's funny to hear all the Audible. It's a bit of a joke that Montclair and Newark are Audible company towns at this point because we've gotten so big. But you know, dozens of families work. You know, people work for us or with us in the town. And but you know, I've been in Montclair a long time, way before Audible, so it'll take just a second because you know, we got here in 1989, and our adult kids all went through the public schools, and I actually got here because I was giving a lecture when I was a writer at the Medill Journalism School, and the editor and the dean was an editor at Rolling Stone, and I had lunch with him, and I said, we really want to leave the city and get a house, but I just don't want to go to one of these white bread suburbs in Connecticut or Long Island. And I wish there was a place like Evanston, which is where Northwestern is, and it's incredibly diverse. And he said, you know, I hear Montclair, New Jersey's like Evanston, kind of mixed. And so that was all it took. We came out, you know, we bought a house. I was kind of isolated here as a writer up in my third-floor garret on Russell Terrace, you know, for years. And I often tell young families who come in that, you know, you have to kind of really go out and get involved and, you know, to meet people in the community. And for me, first of all, I had a book come out and I got to talk to book clubs all over the town. So the intellectual life of the town came back to me. Then I coached and I played hockey. And actually the startup was the Montclair Fossils hockey team, which is now, I got to actually say on the ice last Sunday night that it's the 30th year of it. And I didn't want to say a sad moment because there's a lot of Montclair people here. One of the earliest pioneers with me is a 27-year Montclair firefighter and battalion chief who, unfortunately, Kevin Barry, died of ALS yesterday, but a fantastic you know, member of the community. And then, you know, volunteerism. I was the VP on the Public Library Board, and you know, when they were rebuilding, you know, the South Fullerton Library, and I actually learned a lot about my abilities to create project visions and even get them financed, because we actually raised more money than any other public library in the country for the previous 10 years to you know, to rebuild the library. And the only one that was bigger was the Bangor Main Library because Stephen King gave $5 million himself. And, but it's just, you know, this town's, you know, meant a lot to us, you know, growing up. Anyways, let's set the table for this evening. Interactive storytelling is what we're going to go after, right, Marcus? And you know, we can talk a lot about a lot of things. We just went on about Swedish politics with a depth that only this guy, you know, can kind of pick up on.
We're not doing that today. No, we're not doing that today.
We're not doing that. But
we can talk about hockey, we can talk about Ethiopia, whatever you want, but not that.
Yeah, but between Marcus' story, like a bit of mine and Audible's, food, entrepreneurship, media and the power of storytelling, social activism. We do have to talk about Newark because we've been great allies and the comeback of the great city. So let's get it going. We'll see if there's time for Q&A, but let's kind of roll. Okay, Marcus, intro time. So I was a Marcus fan way, way back because I actually went to a super fancy restaurant in the mid-90s called Aquavit. And Aquavit, this was back when it was the first one, 54th Street, right?
Yeah.
And so
Rockefeller Townhouse.
yeah, it's like this hushed white. It's this beautiful, beautiful, unbelievably fancy Michelin star kind of restaurant, and they serve your herring and lingonberries, and it's licorice-infused booze. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, but it's about as white a restaurant as you could think of in lots of ways, and even coming from Scandinavia. And I find out that the executive chef is this boy genius Amharic kid. He's Ethiopian. And I just remember, that's kind of mind-blowing. And I remember thinking, and I had been in Ethiopia covering the incredible decimation of a generation in 1978, the Red Terror, for Rolling Stone. And that was 6 or 7 years after you were, you were born. But from there, Marcus became one of these youngest ever 3 stars. In the New York Times, youngest ever.
Not anymore.
No. So, but he went through his youngest ever phase, and he doesn't just go on Top Chef Master because he wins it. He wins everything. Fabled Red Rooster restaurant. We all going to talk about that, But at this point in time, Marcus has restaurants in, there's probably Miami, Las Vegas, Bahamas, Montreal, Yankee Stadium, Helsinki, Stockholm, the new Haven Mar just opening up in Chelsea, and of course Marcus B&P in Newark, which we'll talk about.
Yes.
Did I miss any?
No, you did not. Very, very good. Very, very good. You're doing a good job making the black man blush.
Okay, and I'm going to say, he has also become one of the best writers about food. He has cookbooks in Swedish, he has cookbooks in English. He wrote a memoir, came out in 2012. The Red Rooster cookbook is really, it is so filled with unbelievably, he's like an anthropologist or a sociologist when he goes at everything, including food. And I have to tell you, if you look at that, and then of course, he's become a superstar for Audible with his 2 Audible originals. And I will say that he goes about these things. His new one that we're going to talk about, I would put right up there in the world of food. Let's face it, it's a little inundated at this point, media-wise, with talk of food contests, food in every time you turn around. But if you think of a chef's table, if you ever saw that documentary, by most people's standards, is kind of a cut above of being a deeply humanizing and sophisticated way of getting under the skin of people, or maybe the latter days of Anthony Bourdain's journalism, when he really found his voice, I think.
I think we should stop now, because you said my 2 favorite things.
Okay.
Anthony Bourdain, Chef's Table. We should stop right now.
Okay. All right. So I'll stop, except to say that you also became incredibly dapper dresser some of the time. So is that?
My wife.
Okay. Fashion model, wife, a little bit of an impact? Yeah. Okay. I figure it was that. So, all right, so let's go. So, look, accomplishments. You talk about hustle, and we talk about, this drive, this incredible kind of drive. Like, what drives you? Where does it come from?
Well, I think it's folded into many things. I think for me, which we talked about earlier, about 20 years ago, I went back to meet my Ethiopian father, and I went back to the hut where I was born. And it's about the size of 2 4-tops in my restaurant, and it just humbles you, gives you strength, and you realize also how lucky you are, how fortunate you are. And there's an image when I'm always thinking about, what did my sister do to really, how did we get adopted, right? So I think for me, the drive really goes back to how extremely fortunate we've been, lucky. What do you do with that sense of fortune. And then the fact that my grandparents in Sweden came from very poor backgrounds, so poverty was always something that was at the table that we talked about, although my parents were not poor at all. But it was something that was constantly talked about, and choices. So I think the drive come from also watching my father coming from this fishing village, which was extremely poor, and then him becoming a geologist and travel the world and seeing these two worlds that my father was part of, being very much at home at the fishing village, but being of the world, which academia and deals and all of this stuff. So I was constantly watching this, and so I think this is the motivators that I have. This is really the pod. So for me, seeing the hut is also a great inspiration. Literally at the new restaurant Hav, we have a whole wall that is really inspired by the hut.
Oh, wow.
And it's something I brought my son Zion to too. And he was like 3 at the time. He has no clue what he's staring at. But we had to go there to really, it's a starting point of our lives.
Wow. And I think we've talked about this idea that you can have drive, and you can then need the vision, and then you need the process of getting to the vision. And I think I heard in your work for us that you tend to write things down. You tend to write vision statements, basically. Is that important to your process?
It is, but I also feel like food is such a great medium because there are amazing people around you. Like I remember having mentors when I was 7, 18, and still have, but always set up goals for me. And at the time, when you're just a kid, maybe I didn't understand. I remember being 18, and one of the guys said to me, in 18 months, we're gonna get rid of you. But you're gonna go to Switzerland. And I was like, what? I'm gonna get fired in 18 months? How does he know that I'm gonna get fired in 18 months? But he felt like if you work really hard, we're gonna set you up for this place. And he did, 18 months, like 12 months to the date. He said, we need to start working, you need to start thinking about leaving, and we're gonna set you up in this place. So it was always people around me that saw that this kid is working hard, and he's really passionate about cooking. So I feel fortunate that I've always had great leaders around me. But then obviously, it's a craft that you gotta dig. You gotta really enjoy it more than the average. And I love cooking. I love food, and I love sharing food, Yeah.
Was there a point you realized you had this almost preternatural taste, this ability, look, chefs call it perfect taste, because clearly everybody says you do.
I remember being 23 and feeling like I can add value wherever I go. And I just graduated working in a 3-star Michelin restaurant in France. I had to learn French, I had to learn German in Switzerland. And I was like, this felt like the highest level for me. Like, I can actually add value. They need me in the kitchen in a 3-star Michelin restaurant in France. And I felt I graduated. I'm like, wow, this is it. And I remember coming to the States with my $300, and I knew that I can add value. And it was that, the balance between having enough sort of humility and work ethic on this shoulder and arrogance to be able to think clearly and free on this shoulder. Like, you need both. You cannot create if these two things are not constantly in battle with one another, right? I mean, you can't create something unique if you don't have enough identity and clarity about yourself, who you are, where you want to go, and how you want to put it together. And
But still, there's a gift. I mean, the great sommelier is the great taste. When you talk about food, I mean, when you listen to these programs, Marcus actually can hear when something is cooking right. He talks about the jazz in the pan, and you hear it. And this is one of the things that has been great about Audible's success, is that you bring so much imagination to audio when there's not visuals. That, I mean, the programs he does will make you a lot hungrier than watching people cook, because you bring so much to it. And we've even done significant studies of this in terms of at the University of London on how the emotive and the biometric responses to listening are way off the charts versus listening or watching the same thing in a passive way.
The kitchen definitely has sounds, and you know it smells, the fragrance, and definitely has sounds. And you can hear shh, that's a sear, you know, shh, that's a poach, you know, like shh, that's a burnt, you know.
Yeah.
So it's very rhythmic to me, you know.
Yeah. No, he's cooking chicken with in the Harlem piece with great iconic fried chicken guy, and they're talking literally about the exact sound in the pan, whether it's right or it's not. So I want to talk about things that we've done together, both as Audible and also in Newark. And you know, I will say that some people don't realize that Audible started here in Montclair in my third floor writing garret. That was where it kind of happened. And we actually started out with an office on North Fullerton, right across from Immaculate Conception. And I couldn't find a landlord in town to help us scale in town, so we ended up moving to the floodplains known as Willowbrook Mall, where we actually spent years in one of those places where we put garbage bags on our feet to get to work whenever it rained. And but obviously Audible's become, you know, to my utter sense of pride, a really kind of a big thing. I'm proud about it. We pour billions of dollars into the, not for applause, but we brought billions of dollars into the creative economy, and billions of hours are sent to people around the world in 46 languages. They've got 800,000 titles in English and 20 originals per week, and that's where the work with Marcus and so come in. The vision from the beginning, and I wrote a 120-page business plan that was a complete prose statement of what I thought Audible should be in 1994 and 1995, and it kind of tracked it. But the idea eventually was that because it would be this weirdly intimate aesthetic where you would be listening almost always alone, and the performance would be sensibility-wise be private, that you would then go beyond positioning books as scripts, which we did probably 18 years ago with all sorts of famous people, and you'd actually write and produce and direct and act to the aesthetic, and then develop this whole new sound, and that's really what's kind of happened, and you know, it's been you know, kind of amazing to you know, to see, and then you know, I'm really proud that we've gone incredibly deep in the voices of people often who don't have a voice. Our LGBTQ+ you know, repertoire is, you know, our trans content with all different elements of that is larger than most media companies having anything to do with that community and the black voices stuff. It's been great. And then, you know, words and music, all these different things. So I think if you have, you know, so check it out. You know, we've also paid 60,000 different actors ourselves over the last 10 years. So that's a nice creative class kind of thing too. So let's go to, the other thing that happened for me was that because I didn't really come from a traditional background to start a business and stuff, and I was very impacted by, as a child, my times in Chicago, growing up during both the civil rights and the anti-war movement there, and you know, actually knowing people who were like Fred Hampton, who were murdered by the state when I was young. I mean, I was very much, and then a Rolling Stone writer, and you know, New Republic writer, and everything for all those years. I always said if this business adventure got successful, I wanted to basically go back to my early belief that urban inequality was potentially addressable, and it was indeed structural, which now a lot of people know, but you know, a lot of people didn't know for many years. And I, you know, read Jane Jacobs when I was a kid, basically, and so we moved to Newark in 2007 with great purpose to try to accelerate the comeback of an incredibly great city that's only about 9 miles from here, and I think it's been one of the most, you know, impactful thing, and it's allowed our company to have this kind of mantra of what can a company mean in ways that transcend what it does.
And it tells other companies to come to Newark, and it says, I know Detroit has done a lot, but they also have a crush on what's going on in Newark. We talk about it all the time, so it's so important for other business leaders to say, hey, we can put our business in Newark or communities like Newark. So great.
Yeah. No, it's been good. The idea is scalable programs as opposed to, and it's very much impacted by Martin Luther King 1963, that charity's fine, but if you don't speak to the headwaters that cause the need for charity, then structural change kind of doesn't happen. So, you know, our Interns at Scholar program, it trains the vocabulary of the workplace in a way that could be curricularized, or you know, we pay $500 a month to anyone who works in Audible who wants to, after taxes, to move to Newark, and that generates money in the economy and things like that. And then Newark Venture Partners, which you're talking about, which has brought lots of companies to Newark to try to be little Audibles, and I think the leaders of that are here tonight. And it's been great. Anyways, we have a clip that's about some of the stuff we've done together and some stuff in Audible. It's a little repetitive because I didn't realize we were playing a clip about other stuff we do.
It can be repetitive. This is amazing. I'll tell you, when the pandemic started, Don was one of the first calls. We talked, we didn't have a clue how we would start it, but from some of those early calls, late March 2020, when everybody was scared and no one knew what would happen, and in April 2020, Don and our team, we put our teams together and we started something with Newark Working Kitchen, and I know it meant a lot for the hospitality community, and it saved a lot of restaurants, and without it, 25, 30 restaurants in Newark would not be open today, and it was a massive, important thing that we did together, and it wouldn't have happened without your team at Audible, and it wouldn't have happened without you saying, you know what, I don't know about all this red tape, I'm gonna make it happen, and we did make it happen, so thank you.
It was a real startup. But
yes.
So with that, should we still play the clip?
Play the clip.
Okay, yeah, bear with us if there's some repetition, but go for it.
It's estimated that more than 54 million people may struggle to find food this year, including 18 million children. Tonight, CBS's Jim Axelrod tells us about a program in Newark, New Jersey that is serving up hope.
Newark Working Kitchens pays 25 restaurants here to keep their doors open, stoves on, and employees paid, cooking for those who need food most.
It's one of those win-win-wins that is really worthy.
Don Katz is the founder and chairman of Audible, the audiobook company headquartered in Newark that has spearheaded fundraising for the program.
This was an idea that came from people in our organization who understood what was happening to the small business economy in Newark. What if you just went to these amazing restaurants? What if we just bought 200 of your great meals a day? And then we'd figure out how to target the delivery of these meals to the many, many people in Newark who can't go out and should not go out, particularly during a COVID crisis. So we, of course, just took our trucks and our Audible vans, and with amazing volunteers.
What Audible did with Don's leadership really saved the hospitality community in the time when we needed it the most.
Celebrity chef Marcus Samuelsson owns a restaurant in Newark. He says this program should be scaled nationwide.
The Newark Working Kitchen, I think, is very specifically interesting and different. It's a model that you can actually move across the country.
Don has really showed that I'm building this corporation that is way larger than myself at this point. Now, if we pull up here, maybe I can get some of these other guys to pull up as well. And it's not just the thousands of jobs that's created with Audible, right? It's all the surrounding businesses that comes with that as well.
But it's a really testimony to what innovative solutions can be found to empower communities. Audible has been an incredible partner for the city of Newark.
We've been able to create an atmosphere here where everybody feels like all hands are on deck.
I want to take a moment to put the spotlight on the Audible initiative that I've been honored to support for the past year, Newark Working Kitchens.
They've been like a saving grace to our business and our employees.
It gave us all a purpose to even come here.
It's going to our neighbors, it's going to our family members.
Our adventure here has been one that we're incredibly proud of on the business side, but there's no reason not to feel that those business principles and how we got here can be applied to urban innovation in a way that can make a difference.
You have to look at the large community. If you're winning and no one else in the community is winning, what type of community is that to be part of, right?
We're all in this thing together, and I'm grateful.
And I thank you all so much. We hear that over and over and over, and it doesn't get tiring.
So if I was going to leave one thought and one ask, look closely at Newark Working Kitchens, because it's not just a relief effort. It actually empowers small businesses in a way that could lead to their absolute sustenance and their growth.
Don saw that early, and I think that he thinks about corporate responsibility, but the core is really built on curiosity and people. And I think that's really, really an amazing American story.
All right, well.
Yeah.
So it actually got up to 37 restaurants and the 1.6 million meals at $10 a piece. So we raised the money, and it was not, you know, but up to 15 jobs were saved in many of the restaurants, and I think there might even be some restaurateurs here from Newark that were involved with the program. And it was also fun to write an op-ed piece for Fortune with Marcus. And but the truth is, we knew that the relief line wasn't going to work in Newark, partly because we have so many employees and allies on almost every street in Newark. And we knew that once school lunch shut down, and we knew we had employees that didn't have food, and we also knew that with the comorbidity rates and the COVID rates of people living together, people weren't going to get to those lines, and it was usually subsistence food when they got there. So this was a way to, you know, kill various birds with one stone. I'm not going to miss the COVID interview look of you know, the hair down to here and trying to squawk into your computer and get interviewed on the news. But look, you know, partly it was just that everyone who works at Audible, we were so many people from Newark, and this city is just unbelievably rich in creativity and passion and most fantastic people, and it's only it's really close to here. So I think that you know, you know, there was a point, I want to ask Marcus about this. 2019 was the first time in U.S. history that more people ate in restaurants than bought their food in grocery stores. It was that inflection point. And we know restaurant culture, we can tell. I mean, it was just on a tear, and Marcus with a leading light of the celebrity chef element. But we also knew that the working poor, when the shit hit the fan, were not laborers anymore like they were to the Depression. They were mostly people working in the food industry who were, you know, very, you know, nominally paid, often subsistence, and without benefits and the like. So the idea was, you know, New Deal-like in terms of trying to raise the money. It wasn't that easy, given various, particularly other corporate responses to like the realities of what was going on in COVID. But that was kind of the idea. But Mark, bringing me up to date on even from your restaurants to restaurants in general, how's the comeback been from the devastation of the COVID?
Well, I think that restaurant community, first of all, we are a strong community and we have each other, and many wonderful things came out of this, like restaurant and, you know, independent restaurant coalitions, and people figured out how to work together. And also, you guys, customers said, restaurant matters in our neighborhood. You know, I think people really thought about what would my city, my community look like without a restaurant, without a barbershop, without a coffee shop, because once restaurants are gone, you know, all those small businesses are gone. And so once people was able to come back out again, people came back to the restaurants, but the relationship was now different, because we as chefs and restaurateurs were extremely grateful because you guys picked up swag, you supported us in all the different, you picked up takeout. It was a different dialogue that is still happening. And it's certain restaurants pivoted and did really well during this time, but a lot of restaurants still struggling to figuring out how much can I see in the restaurant and how much it's takeout, because every business cannot be a takeout business. And then some new business come out of it, like gifting, the way we now, through all these different platforms, you can now order boxed food and really high-end food. So just like any time of crisis, a year after, or 2 years after, it's always been, not just in America, great innovation. And that's what you see with restaurants now. You see it, you know, TikTok, Instagram, social media. A lot of people are doing a lot of different pop-up restaurants, and landlords are now realizing my buildings is empty. Maybe I should talk to that food truck guy and invite them in. So you start to see a whole new generation of innovation in terms of hospitality that I think is here to stay. So in 5 years, we can look back at this time. Now it's almost too soon, but I see a lot of positive signs, and I see customers are coming back.
That's great. Well, I think we both hope that the wealth creation that the citizens of a place like Newark and other cities, you know, need can come through the food economy coming back, because it's very deep in New Jersey. There's some good stuff going on, but it is all worth knowing that we live in, by most measures, the most unequal state in the country. The white citizens of New Jersey are net asset, household assets about $322,000, and black families it's $18,000, and Latino and Latina families it's $26,000. A place like Newark has 1/3 of the population living in poverty, and the kids live many years less on average than kids in Manhattan. So this is a place that needs, and the reason for this disparity is the state of Camden, Trenton, Newark, you know, Irvington and Patterson, and you know, it's something that can and should change, and there's lots of people now who believe there's ways to, you know, to have this happen. But the truth is, you know, without some money, then the inequities related to your civil rights, your health, your educational opportunities, it all kind of goes from there. And we saw that a lot of the restaurants that we were working with, none of them got the PPP money that sophisticated restaurants where you have an accountant, a lawyer, got. You get the reality that, you know, the earned income tax credit, which the New York Times would tell you is the godsend of, you know, of poverty eradication and stuff, that a lot of people in the food industry don't actually even know about it, let alone apply for it. So there's a lot of work to do. But there's fantastic news too, which is Newark rising. It continues, and you know, we're incredibly optimistic, all of us who work and care about Newark. So there's thousands of apartments being built, literally. I mean, there's lots of construction coming up. The ones that have been built are all getting filled, and people are moving from the neighborhoods and from other places to be there. Melba's is moving across the street from Audible's headquarters. Now, Melba, which you have to talk about, you know, Watson was, she was Sylvia Wood's, one of her proteges. Sylvia's of Harlem was just an iconic restaurant, as far as I know.
My neighbor.
It's like invented the gospel brunch, as far as I know. Again, it goes way, way back. And, but that place is going to have like 300 seats and multi-levels, and it's going to have, you know, valet parking, and along with Marcus is actually doing a new food emporium very close to us too, more of an Italy-like environment, and we're working on other things together. So, and you know, Newark's incredibly rich in food. I mean, it's an immigrant city. It's the friendliest city in Newark in many ways. If you ever look at the Rutgers Newark graduation, it's unbelievable if you like the idea of diversity and, you know, the idea that equality is the purpose of the country we live in. It's unbelievable. It's like 15% Muslim, 15% Jewish, 15% African American. It's like it's a rainbow poster of people, and who incidentally all go out and get most of the patents and actually have the highest percentage of startups, immigrant entrepreneurs, first-generation degree getters are kind of off the charts. There's just so much untapped, you know, capacity there. And so you are like a superstar immigrant. So, is it true you got here with $300 in your pocket? Is that a myth?
Yeah, no. I wish I had 4. I had 3, absolutely. And I was stupid enough to think, I remember like the first weekend I was in New York, you know, like you see those guys that had like the gambler guys and they have like a dot in the middle. And I took out $50, so I took out like a sixth of my worth. And I was like, I can beat that guy. And of course, he took my money right away. So then I had $250. So it was going down quickly. But, you know, I've always been, you know, I think the subtle difference between an immigrant and a refugee, which most people don't really understand that. Like, I was so lucky of being an immigrant from a country that I could also go back to. So always having that kind of luxury. If it didn't work out, I could go back to Sweden. That is very different, let's say, if you come from, I'm just using a country now, like let's say you've been a political asylum from Bangladesh or Iran or something like that, and you can't go back. So I always had the luxury of being able to go back to Sweden, and it gave me that extra step of confidence. And I could also, speak English. This is something that my parents, they raised me. We spoke a lot of English at home. My cousins are Canadians, and my auntie is Jewish, and she lived in the States. So English was definitely our second language, but not just a school language, but something that we spoke a lot at home. My parents really prepared me to one day you will live abroad. I didn't know what they were talking about, but my dad, they were right.
Yeah, we're glad you came. So let's talk about your Audible originals. Let's talk about Our Harlem at first. I have to tell you, when I listened to it, I thought I was back in class with Ralph Ellison, my teacher.
Yes.
Where you're in Harlem and people, and Duke Ellington and Marcus Garvey, they're alive. I mean, what Marcus did and does is he literally goes to school on a new cuisine, a new area. The background stuff is profound, and the show is just literally a pan to the Great Migration and the unbelievable, and the immigration from abroad, and what the cultural positives that were brought over the 70 years of the Great Migration from the South and the like, and the wealth. I mean, between Gordon Parks and Marcus Garvey and Langston Hughes and James Baldwin and Duke Ellington, and everybody's kind of alive, and the characters you found. I mean, that guy Dapper Dan.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Literally encyclopedic fashion guy. You should talk about him for a minute. He's like he goes on about the zoot suit. As one of the greatest design inventions of American. Like, it's almost like people talking about jazz and the blues. It's some core to the American experience. So do you remember this?
No, absolutely. I mean, first of all, to make these docs, it would not be possible with the amazing staff and team at Audible, right? I felt very lucky when you really set the table. We talked about it in the hallways in your building, and then boom, Marcus, we're going to do this now. And I'm like, all right, how do we do it? But I knew that Harlem as a community was so rich, and it was really about listen to former Mayor David Dinkins, or listen to Dapper Dan, or listen to these incredible storytellers that talks about Harlem, past, present, future. And that's what we were able to do with Our Harlem, with the seat at the table that, and the producers I met there, Martha and Jared and my team as well. It wouldn't be possible without them. So with seat at the table, Jonathan Waxman, which has been a mentor for me for many, many years, is a great friend, incredible chef. When we started to talk about which restaurants was really part of changing America, why do we eat the way we do today? What impact does restaurants have on our eating habits? And how come restaurants are part of pop culture? Can restaurants be part of a civil rights conversation? Was it there at the civil rights movement? All of these kind of like large pieces about American history. What is the Vietnam War? How is that connected to restaurants, for example? So we were, can a restaurant change and transform a neighborhood? So all these bigger questions, gentrification, all of these different things that people are talking about constantly, how are they going to be heard through the voices of these incredible people?
Right, and that's the key, your voices, the way, so let's be clear, it's not anything polemical. I mean, having that vision, they profile deeply and humanize at an unbelievable level. 8 restaurants. One's Jezebel in Hell's Kitchen, Dookie Chase in New Orleans, I'll just list them, Spago in West Hollywood, Campanile in LA, Ben's Chili Bowl in DC, Prune in New York City, the French Laundry in Yountville, and the Vietnamese place, the Slanted Door. And some of them aren't existing anymore. Some of the people aren't there anymore. And some of the people who are recorded are recorded right before they die. It's an unbelievable, because it has an elegy characteristic to it, and the profundity of it is amazing. And I just think we should pick some of them up. I know. So Jezebel, I used to go to Jezebel in the 80s, and it was, if anybody else remembers it, it was in the middle of Hell's Kitchen when nobody went to Hell's Kitchen. And it was this incredible impresaria lady from the fashion industry named Alberta Wright, who wanted it to be like a Broadway show. It actually looked like my idea of a New Orleans brothel. I mean, everything was draped, these incredibly chiseled waiters were all dressed in kind of costume, and you know, it was all this incredible low country. It's too bad Evie's not here. Low country, South Carolina, you know, cuisine, and I remember the fried chicken livers and everything. But you know, talk about it, because you said you channeled this Alberta when you did Red Rooster.
I mean, I came to New York in the 90s, and you know, just like most New Yorkers, you have 5 roommates, then you have 4 roommates, then you have 3, and then you really made it. When I had 2 roommates, I moved to Hell's Kitchen. And I happened to move right across the street from Jezebel's. And this restaurant had, you know, black cars outside every night, and the sign was tiny. And I was like, whatever is going on in that restaurant? What are they doing? The Knicks were there, Michael Jordan was there, young Denzel Washington was there, but also Broadway people were there, particularly Black Broadway. And eventually I started to meet Alberta in the morning when I was going to work. And I was like, always kind of feared her and looked in the window. And she's like, what the fuck are you looking at? And I was like, nothing, I'm just going to work. And then when I came back from work, she's like, how's Midtown today? You know, what were you serving? She was always interested in what I was doing without giving me any kind of attention or anything like that. She's like, you can sit by the bar, but don't say anything. Don't talk to anyone. You're going to fuck it up. And I was like, but then watching, and she for me was this, which happened very often with incredible Black women, the geniuses that are in our neighborhoods that can do these things without not gone to school, raised her kids, built a restaurant, never worked in a restaurant before, designed the restaurant. And I'm like, when I just want new chairs at Aquavit, we have a design meeting. Who did the chairs? She's like, fool, I did the chairs. And everything, she curated everything. And I just watched this lady work. I'm like, when I grow up, that's the coolest person I know. Like, she was by far the coolest person. And I know that Red Rooster would not be Red Rooster without me really watching these 2 people with Alberta Wright and also Duke Chase, Leah Chase in New Orleans, that we also talk about. But so some of the restaurants that Jonathan and I talk about are world famous, like French Laundry and Thomas Keller, and like Spago. But some of them are just local gems that you kind of, just like you had to have been there. And you will never be able, you can't replicate Jezebel. It was a moment. And that's why I think it's so important. It's also a moment before internet, right? And I speak to a lot to my younger cooks, and if they can't Google it, if they can't see it, it's like it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it existed. I was there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And Jezebel's and Alberta is a true, it's a love letter to the genius that she was.
It's the emotion he brings to the guidance, you know, that he offers. It's way beyond kind of a disembodied, documentary voice, and the voices he brings in.
And Jonathan. And Chef Jonathan Waxman, that is such a great partner, because he was truly there. Like, he was part of creating California cuisine the way we know it today. He was buddies and was also a chef in Los Angeles at the time. So he knew Wolfgang Puck at a very, very early age. And he was there with Nancy at Campanile and so on. These iconic restaurants now. What Jonathan brings to this, I'm a food nerd and a fan of these places, but Jonathan was truly there. And even with Jezebel's, she got 2 stars, and Jonathan had a very happening restaurant with Jams across town, and he got 2 stars at the same time, and they were like friends and competitors in the same time. So Jonathan has a very different, very personal relationship with Miss Alberta as well.
Yeah, it is, which comes through, and I do want to get to Spago in a few minutes, but what's interesting too is she was such a classic entrepreneur, and that there was just nothing was going to get her way, but she was also going to do it her way. So she goes to Paris, and because she refuses to not have the collard greens be exactly as she needs them to be, she breaks the business because there's no way you can have this stuff shipped in, collard greens, shipped in, and that doesn't go well, and it has a sadness to it because time starts passing her by to some extent, and she was really hit by 911. Yeah. Which really hurt her business to the point, and a lot of these businesses were not accumulating massive amounts of capital. So it gets sad, and she dies in 2015. In a sense, almost would have been forgotten if not, for this this elegy. Which
I remember the last conversation I had with her, and also the Paris moment. I mean, let's pause there. There is a reason why no American chefs open a restaurant in Paris, right? She didn't care. She's going to open in Champs-Élysées. And she put her collard greens on the Concorde. Now, how cool is that? That's like, who's sitting next to you at 3B? Collard greens. That's her vision, how big it was. Like, I'm just like out of, all that. But yes, my last conversation with her was about 6 months before she passed. She had moved to Harlem at that point. She was smoking in the restaurant. I was like, Alberta, come out. You can't smoke in the restaurant. She's like, what do you mean I can't smoke in the restaurant? I'm like, you can't. It's law. You can't smoke in the restaurant. So come out on the patio. So she goes out on the patio. I'm like, Alberta, let's go outside. You're not allowed to smoke in the patio either. She's like, what the fuck is this? She's like this. Marcus, I live right across the street now, so I can watch you. I know your customers. I'm going to open a restaurant right next to you and take all your fucking customers. And that was my last conversation with her. She never lit up, she never changed. Like, that's incredible to me. I'm still chasing Alberta.
No, it's a beautiful piece. And so let's talk about Dooky Chase, because that's one where I just didn't know about it. And I've done literally barbecue tours, like journalists who knew what was what. Journalists would always tell you the greatest barbecue places throughout the South were. And I would go on literally across just tears of just catfish, or just just get assignments down there. So I thought I would have known about this. But here's Leah Chase. She's born in 1923. And in Madisonville, Louisiana, it's super poor, and you call her the Jackie Robinson of chefs. So talk about the Dooky Chase, phenomenon a bit, because it's an incredible story.
Yeah, I mean, Leah Chase and Dooky Chase, her husband Dooky Chase, their family still run the business, Dooky Chase in New Orleans. She's an incredible hero, and what very often happens with Black stories, right? You have Julia Childs, but Leah becomes a local hero, right? And she did local TV, but never really on nationwide. And that happens very often with BIPOC stories, right? We do the work, but don't get the recognition. But Leah, for me, she's such an incredible hero because, first of all, to be a woman, a Black woman in the South, to run a business, right there, I can do it. Secondly, she and her husband wanted very different things. He was a musician, and he wanted a place for his friends to come and pick up some po' boy sandwiches. So they had two concepts where his friends were like po' boy sandwiches in the front, but Leah's restaurant, she wanted fine dining. Yeah. So she was cooking like Sol Meunier and all of this fancy stuff, and you walk into her dining room, and it was Jacob Lawrence, and it was all this incredible art in there, and they figured out how to be together, have two concepts in one restaurant, right? And never lower our ambition. And and it was also one of the first integrated restaurants in America, which meant that for many, many years, she broke the laws just by serving a dining room that would look like this hall here, right? She didn't care. She did it.
It was like a speakeasy for the civil rights movement. Yeah. That's what it came off as. They had civil rights meetings, including freedom riders in there. So they're black and white people together, completely against the law in the Jim Crow South. And they were doing it anyway for years. But this, Ray Charles wrote a song about it. Sarah Vaughan would go there every time she was there. It's an amazing kind of underground story that you just wouldn't get. And
but even like I remember when Katrina happened, which is now what 18 years ago, something like that. I remember calling Leah. I said, okay. At that point, she's 80, right? She's 79. No, she's 81, 80 at that point. And I said, wow, you guys had an incredible run. Well, you and Dookie, I understand. Everybody will understand if you're not opening back up the restaurant. She's like, what are you talking about? We're going to open the restaurant back up. And 6 months later, she opens the restaurant back up. And they have another 15-year run after that. And now when you go to New Orleans in the airport, now you can find it on DoorDash at the airport, and her great-great-grandson runs it. So it's not just a restaurant, it's a community place, and it's also a way to show how an American legacy can be kept, right? And evolve, because her grandkids have evolved the business too. So it's such a good story.
She dies at 96 in 2019, and she and Dookie were married for 71 years, and her voice is just so powerful. And so is yours, because again, the sense of love.
And Wynton Marsalis is on there too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wynton's voice is the coolest voice you can ever find. So.
So he's that's for sure. But the whole thing with Katrina almost knocking her out, it is interesting how many acts of nature are hit. I mean, you had your own experience with 2008, right? So the financial crisis hit one of the only thing you didn't touch that turned to gold, as far as I can tell, is that one restaurant that you got hit, and you take 911 and you take in, the things that, COVID now. It's amazing how adversity hits the fragility of restaurants. Yeah,
I mean, the majority, when you drive through a neighborhood, all of these mom and pop restaurants, which is really the heartbeat of American economy, right? And it's maybe 15 people working, 8 people working in these restaurants, but it puts kids through college and so on. But that restaurant works like an American family. They have enough maybe for 1 month rent, maybe even for 2. But after that, if something happens, it closes, right? So it's the thin margin in hospitality is so thin. So when something catastrophic like COVID happens, it's so difficult to come back. But the resiliency, and that's what we get in these stories, right? It's not just famous person opens a restaurant and everything is great. We don't even cover those stories. This is true, fierce work ethic, luck, right time, the combination, everything in that stew, right? Yeah. That makes it such a special place,
Another thing that runs through this is your incredible respect for women of color, these incredible women, and you evoke often your grandmother, either foraging or slurping, or it kind of comes in your head all the time. Right?
No, I had 2 sisters. I never left the house. I never want to fight in my house. It was either my sisters beat me down, or my cousins, or my mom, or my grandmother. So I think I was put in place so that I better do things that honored women, because it's like I still see them sort of like messing with me otherwise. But no, of course, but it's also how our industry is completely backwards, right? In terms of the majority of people who cook in the world are women, yet when you look in hospitality and restaurant, you think it's like only men. It's like nothing could be further from the truth. So we have to start, and the industry is changing, and how media is changing it now, it's good. But for so long, we thought food was owned by one country, France, And we realized, other countries are cooking too, wow. Yeah. And then you realize it's only guys with tall hats. I mean, I love hats, but different hats. And, you know, so now with all these mediums, we learn through storytelling that you can do it too. And there was many people that made what we think about where food is today, why it's in pop culture, like why my profession is popular today. It's not because of me, it's because of the people who came before us that really created that.
I think you've done a lot to move it forward along with people of your generation.
Thank you.
You're right. That's good.
Thank you.
So let's go. So Jonathan kind of led the Wolfgang Puck. I have to tell you, everybody knows Wolfgang Puck, yeah. But you learn things about him that I'm sure others just could not have known. I mean, what an iconoclast he was, and how many idols he was breaking, and how he was defying everything he came from, which I'd like to hear you kind of talk about, but also tell you, like, you got to listen to him, because I won't be the only one. He talks exactly like Arnold Schwarzenegger with a higher voice. Yeah. And of course, they must come from the same village in Austria or something.
They do, very close by. They're both from Steiermark in Austria.
But I learned tons of stuff about who he was and what he was trying to do and how radical it was. Can you talk about that?
I mean, Wolf is Michael Jordan. You know, he really is the Michael Jordan of cooking, and you know, but also that was random, right? He came to America because he liked cars. He, of course, came to the great food town of Indianapolis. Yeah. I'm like, you're a chef, and therefore I was like, and then he realized. He met Barbara and they moved to Los Angeles, and his wife was very, very much part of making Wolfgang the way we know Wolfgang Puck today. They created Spago together, but he also had no fear, right? He knew that what he learned in France, and it's back one in Austria, and in America, that French food, he needed to lighten up and make it rock and roll. But he also knew he needed the great ingredients that California had. And he started to name the farmers, which today everybody thinks like, what's the big deal? It was a big deal. But then he completely fearless. He's like, I like pizza. So we're gonna have an open wood fire in the middle of the kitchen, and we're gonna serve pizza and rack of lamb. And the rack of lamb is gonna come from Sonoma, and the grape's gonna come from so-and-so, and we're gonna name all of this stuff. But I also like sashimi, so that's gonna also be on the menu. And it's incredible. I mean, today it's hard to understand it, but this was done in 1982, right, in Hollywood. So he had the freedom of California, but then this rock star status, but then still the skills of a 3-star Michelin chef, and the vision and the mission to put it all together. Right. So Wolf, for me, it's really the one that broke everything into making it pop culture.
So another voice that's really strong is Barbara Lazaro, who turns out to have been a designer. So on top of Wolfgang breaking the brigade, he said no to the yes chef thing. Yeah. He completely broke that, which was really radical at the time. But she ends up designing the first restaurant that apparently was noisy on purpose, that was busy, that had music. There was never music in a restaurant. They did all this stuff for the first time, and everything about the design, and then we're going against the fussiness of then Nouvelle cuisine, which was a little precious at the time. But it was fascinating. But it was also it closed in 2001, and also their marriage didn't make it, which is another kind of a little bit of a theme that you guys kind of pick up on. But they clearly they respect each other a lot from
no.
They do get a sense of, a working couple's passage.
Yeah, I mean, Spago moved, and now it's in Beverly Hills, but there is no secret that Barbara was part of the secret sauce of creating a dining room that wasn't just tables and chairs, it was true design. And I think what Wolfgang also understood was to build talented people, put all the talented people in that kitchen and the dining room. And so many people, we talked about that tree, right, of talent. And out of that kitchen comes Campanile and Chef Mark Peel and Nancy Silverton. And they opened then a couple of years later, La Brea Bakery and Campanile, which, again, a bakery, America's best bakery next to one of America's best restaurants. Today, we're so jaded, we have so many concepts in front of us and so much stuff, but to do that at that time, it's incredible. It's really, really incredible. And what does it say about them as a young couple? Saying like, no, this bread is not good enough. We're gonna, switch the hours. We're gonna work. They lived on top of the restaurant as well.
Yeah. Well, she said that's the only way she could have a family, because she would get up at 2. So they lived above Campanile, and she would get up at 2 and go back and forth, and that was the only way they saw their kids. But then again, that marriage didn't. It was kind of a sad story, Campanile, I thought. Including what happens to the chef.
Chef Mark and Jonathan and Mark were best friends, and Jonathan Waxman is the last person that interviews Chef Mark. He didn't know at the time that it would be the last interview, but once you start a project like that, it's like life. It takes you on a journey, and if you're open to it, you're gonna get back on that road, maybe, but we learned so many different things, and it's been one of the most joyful things I've ever worked on, and we had a blast.
Because their voices are captured, and then you realize he's got terminal cancer. I guess that's a bit of a spoiler, but still, I'll try not to do that again. So, and then Prune, which I used to go. I couldn't believe that sardines and Triscuits and my idea of fun, beef tongue and monkfish liver.
Monkfish liver.
She was it, and it's definitely only wanted to be a writer. Her piece is, the way she talks is like poetry. She's just very, very, very intense and
she's incredible
and smart, and she's funny as hell. The way she talks about. Her success was dependent on anti-anxiety medication and things like that. It's like, it's a great one. And then we got Ben's Chili Bowl, which was another place that I had not been fully aware of, although friends in D.C., certainly were. To come from Chicago, I think of as the hot dog center of the universe.
Yeah.
But I didn't know about these iconic hot dogs. You want to talk about Ben's a little bit? Because that's another great one.
Virginia Lee, I love it because it's a family business again, but it's also it's a love story of an immigrant from Trinidad that marries, Ben marries Virginia Lee, and he's Muslim. Although they start a hot dog business, which is amazing. He has his crate. So it's just only in America, right? It's good. It's good. But then it also talks about the history of DC. Their restaurant, Ben's Chili Bowl, was in the traditional Black Broadway of DC, which was a thriving part of town. But then all the different things that happened in that community throughout the 60s, but they're super smart. They bought the building early. They saved up, which is one of the reasons why they could hold on to their business, right? And then when DC puts in that line, they almost lose the business because people leave the neighborhood for many, many years. So, and then with the crack pandemic through the 80s and everything, but it's really, they held on, and now they're thriving, and they worked through COVID. And same thing, next generation comes in, and now you can buy Ben's Chili Bowl through Goldbelly, right?
Yeah.
So the kids and the families really restructured it and made it modern. So some of these predominantly Black and BIPOC businesses, if the leader dies and stops working on it, very often the businesses disappear.
Yeah.
But they kept it and held on to it and turned it into...
They provided boxed lunches for Martin Luther King and others during the '63 March on Washington. They hosted SNCC meetings. I was thinking of that because Charles Shedd died the other day, one of the founders. It was near Howard. And they, during the rebellion period in '68, talked about basically everything in the neighborhood went the flames, but he put the word soul brother in the window.
Yeah.
Tells a story about didn't get burned. So, but it's great storytelling. And the French Laundry stuff, we should go maybe if we got time for a little Q&A, but the fact that the French Laundry guy, he went out of business more than anybody. It's did you know that before you did the piece?
I knew Chef Thomas, but I knew Jonathan knew much better than me.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, Jonathan, this is you got to go. You got to go. And we got to catch Thomas, because Thomas is such a perfectionist. His restaurants are so great. I said, we got to catch him in a different step here.
Yeah, this is
only
Thomas
Jonathan.
Keller, who also has Per Se.
Yeah. And only Jonathan, he would only open up like that to Jonathan. And Jonathan did such a good job going to the restaurant. And who knew that the key to success was to be fired not once, twice, but 3 times. We learned. But I think it's so great, because when you think about something excellent, you think about this person as a perfectionist all his life. He wasn't. Thomas Keller struggled in food. He didn't even know if he wanted to be in food. So it's all of these things that comes out that I feel it's a great inspiration for people, because it can be intimidating to start something, and you always think about these great people as where they are now, but there's a whole journey before they got there, and that's what I love about that story.
Yeah. I'm going to skip at the slanted door. Was this guy Charles Fan? I mean, talk about it, a story. He escapes in a boat in '75 from Saigon, ends up in Guam, 13-year-old, no money, and his slanted door sounds like it's just you got to hear it. It's just an amazing story. So, so your teachings that the success factor you reflect on. It's like you don't have to be fancy. Hospitality isn't a category. It's how people feel in a restaurant, and it's as important as the food. I mean, you almost and that the connection to the community is most of the battle. And you made it sound like the same trust you have at your local church or your barber shop, is kind of what you need. This thing's just full of wisdom. And so I asked one more thing. It's to the end. So I get asked this all the time too. I mean, do you think the kind of entrepreneurialism or the idea of just thinking these things up, and we talk about connecting the dots, our people principles. Basically, if there's something you want to, if you're interested in Audible, you don't know about it, read the people principles, because I finally sat down and wrote like what's the stuff I've kind of learned over 2 careers that going to make these things work. But do you think the entrepreneurial levels that you need, is it born? Can you do it if you don't have something organic or some problem? I mean, someone close to me said, I have an endless need to prove myself. It's like, which I know it comes from fatherlessness and other things. There's huge studies of entrepreneurs having fatherlessness in their background. Do you think there's, you talk about the hustle and as being almost like an art form. Do you think it's something you can just acquire, or is it something you kind of got to be one of those people?
For me, it's about curiosity around people, right? And when you're in an environment like America, which constantly throws you so many different images and situations, for me, it's almost, you have to look what's around you and figure out, I wonder if I can do that a little bit different. Whether it's making a meatball different, or whether it's making that pizza crust thinner, or whether it's making it thicker, or whatever it might be, right? And only in a diverse landscape can you start thinking different. For me, everybody's different. But that's why I love America so much, because you're constantly challenged with these situations. And you got to kind of always think outside the box.
But you take that in, and these dots kind of appear. So one of the things I kind of bonded with Jeff Bezos back in 1996 when we first met and discussed here, they were way, a couple of years ahead with Audible, but we had the same fund, was this idea of inventing before they ask, which is core to this working backwards, kind of principle. And there are huge numbers of things that are literally invented, like a lot of the stories here, and aren't necessarily permutations on the team. People who go to business school are taught to solve the customer problem, which I always teach when I'm talking to the entrepreneurs. It's kind of a little bit of it's okay, but it's actually not the same as these things that where you say, well, wait, these things exist. Because, Audible is totally against the time. There are only 3,000 audiobooks in existence. When I kind of started it, it was probably had about a 95% chance of not working because I was so much too early and there were so many near-death experiences. But I'd like to think you could just learn it, but I also think there's lots of people who can do it, but I wrestle with it.
Yeah, but you need both. You need managerial skills and people who are really good at that, and entrepreneurial skills. And you know, like with Red Rooster, I was always thinking about how can we change the landscape of cooking where we can honor Black culture in a different way, right? And so rather than talk about it, let's do it. So for me, it's like being in Harlem, having an open kitchen. It's not a large open kitchen. And slowly, what's going to come out of Red Rooster is Black entrepreneurship and not being afraid of people leaving, right? Because that's actually a good thing that people leave, because now you can go out and do it yourself. So looking back 12 years later, you can see, I look at this landscape and I'm inspired about the movement, not just what we did, but a lot of restaurants. So with Hav, our new restaurant, thinking about the landscape, and really, I think the pandemic allows you to sit down and really think about, does restaurant matters? If they do so, let's come back out and really think about how can we be an advocate and set a table for female in the industry, entrepreneurship, and eventually ownership. So with Hav, all the leadership positions are held by women of color. General manager, head baker, executive chef, and so on. So again, it sets the table. So if you think 5 years from now, what's going to come out of that are ownership, are also the other side, consumer-based banks saying, hey, we can lend, it's possible, I met this audience already, I saw her on today's show, right? Because it's not just what comes the plate, it's also what the train that comes with that. So, but that takes team, and that takes, I'm very privileged to have a great team. And you know, my business partner, Derek Evans, is in the audience, and we talk about this, we plan this. And I also know that I alone can't do it, and very often I have an idea, and that's not always right, and you have to pull back and like, that's a good idea, that's a pop-up, that's not a restaurant, or that's a menu item.
Right.
That's a weekend,
I think that resonates for me. I mean, I knew, because I was a journalist, I knew you have to be incredibly honest about what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I was incredibly clear, and I would have
a lot.
I mean, there's so many hundreds of people who came around to be part of the adventure of amazing, amazing skill sets. And now, as I'm becoming founder, and our CEO's in the audience, a Montclair guy named Bob Kerrigan, and I'm just, it's in great hands. But it always has been, you know, you have to be incredibly honest about what you don't know, because ego does kind of take over, and then, you know, find all the supporting people and people who believe in it. In my case, it was like I had to find people who were willing to take huge pay cuts from decent jobs to come and jump into this crazy idea. So Derek will probably say no, but do you think you have another couple minutes for a question or two?
Sure, let's do it. Great. Let's do it. It just steps in. And I just want to say before that, thank you to the entire team at Audible. These stories are amazing. It would not be possible with all your hard work. Listen to them, see it at the table. We had a lot of fun making it. Thank you. Just want to say that.
I think there's microphones around.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Question. So, what is your favorite dish to cook, and also what is your favorite dish to eat?
Yeah, I would say I love eating sushi. It's something that I know I can't make, and I love it. Then I would say I enjoy making Swedish meatball with my son, because that's something my grandmother taught me, and he's about 6.5 now, and that was the age when I started to cook with my grandmother, so I would say those two things are connected for me.
I love watching you on Iron Chef.
Thank you.
You're a great competitor. So how does that competition inform or inspire your day-to-day cooking and what goes into your restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, I knew at that point that whatever we were doing, I wanted to share a story of Black cooking, modern Black cooking. So whatever they were throwing, whatever protein we would cook with, I knew I wanted to cook something out of the continent from Africa, because the beauty of a streamer is that the world can see it, right? So no matter what, sometimes with African inspired food is, in competition, it's very difficult because you don't know if the judge even knows what that's supposed to be. So you have to create a language and cook, basically bridges cooking so people, you know that whoever you cook for will understand it. And it's a big risk. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But it wasn't about winning. It was really about presenting this food uncompromised at a stage that is so much bigger than yourself. And we did that, and then we had a lot of fun. And end of the day, it went well.
Hi there. I also wanted to show you that I'm wearing your shirt.
Oh, no, you're rocking it. Totally. Yeah, I see you.
That was really my main reason for standing up. But actually, I was at your restaurant a few weeks ago, and I was really impressed with, I mean, obviously the food and the drinks were flowing, but your art collection, and I understand that a lot of the pieces are part of your personal collection. You have Derek Adams, Kennedy Wiley. Just curious what inspires you and what draws you to a piece of artwork.
There was really two people. It was Leah Chase. I mean, she was a huge art collector of African-American art and had Rumar Bearden in her, still has Rumar Bearden in her dining room and Jacob Lawrence. And then also our dear friend, Thelma Golden, that is part of everything that we do from the Studio Museum of Harlem. She's also helped us with our new restaurant, Hav. And actually, the restaurant in Chelsea is actually, Derek Adam is like a creative director for the restaurant. We have his mermaids in the restaurant now. And so art has always, for me, been an incredible way. Art and music, besides the food, has been a great way to give another nuance of this layer of Blackness and African-American history that can be so foreign and mystique to people, right? But through art, through music, through the food, through hospitality, the picture gets fuller. Just being friends with, coming up in New York with a lot of great, like Sanford Biggers and Julie Moretto and so on, it's just, it's been really helpful to me to have them sort of bring their art to the restaurant. And I just enjoyed the ride, being creative and seeing their career flourish as well.
Don and Marcus, we have time for one more question.
Yes. Yes.
Hi there, I'm Macy Felitas, and you both spoke about the importance of your teams, and you've both clearly built incredible teams. What process do you go through when selecting who to work with and who ultimately joins your team?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm actually not selecting at this point anymore, but over the years of Audible's, huge growth and becoming this big kind of company, you obviously had to have fundamental skill sets in a domain that is part of the repertoire of the team. But if you got the vision of the possible thing, if you could read these, since they wrote them, the people principles, and try to understand what your competence are against this kind of vision-backed company, this idea of working backwards, from a vision, then you're probably going to excel at a company like Audible, more than, and you probably have a lot more fun working there. So I always wanted to have people who actually did like the idea of having a job that they could look at as a personal adventure, and that the idea of a great job that integrated work and life rather than completely separated it. Mm-hmm. And I think that you need a high percentage of people like that, particularly with startup-like companies that are invented and the like.
We hired a lot through a program that was founded by a gentleman called Richard Grossman, specifically in the kitchen. Career through culinary arts, works in inner city high schools in 9 states at this point, and raises money for scholarships. The student goes to college, culinary schools, and then when they come back out from that, very often we have jobs for them, or our colleagues have jobs for them. I met some incredible, life-changing people through that program. And not all, we have master sommeliers coming from that program. We have restaurant owners, but also a lot of people that just added great value to our industry. So finding other programs in a very competitive job market right now has been helpful for us to really find people that want to be part of hospitality. They might not know where they want to sit on this, right? Whether they want to work on the restaurant side, the computer side, the marketing side, whatever it might be, and that's okay. But if they've gone through CCAP, I know that the fundamental and their foundation is really, really strong.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Don Katz.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Marcus Samuelsson.
Thank you,
Don
Montclair.
Katz.
Thank you very much. We're going.